This is where the fun begins.
Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose.
King Kong ain't got shit on me!
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the
Everybody
procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
Say my name.
And here we go.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Grab your snacks, get your popcorn ready. It's about to get realish. Thank you so much for joining us again on another episode of Realish today. I am joined by my esteemed co-hosts. We've got the Podfather, the OG himself, the reason why we are all here today, the Lord of the Dax himself, Derrick Myers, and of course, we've got Matty T. Matty Ice, the coldest man from the north with the hottest takes, Matthew Tirado. How's it going, you guys?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Good to see you guys.
I say I appreciate the Matty Ice name, but you just call me a washed up 36-year-old quarterback who ain't gonna be in the league no more.
Damn, bro.
Wow.
Damn. Hey, it's because you got ice water in your veins, okay? You are now the true, right? The true Matty Ice, but
I respect it. Thank you,
yes, sir. But we have a lot of, but beyond the pleasantries, right? We've got a lot of things to touch on this final installment of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. But before we get into our feature presentation for the day, just want to remind all you guys, right? Excuse me, to follow us on all social media platforms, OTS Media Co. and then OTS Media on YouTube. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell so that you don't miss a second of all of our awesome stuff we've got going on at OTS, whether it's lifestyle, movie stuff like this on Realish, or our in-depth sports coverage. So many different angles we've got coming on those OTS channels. So make sure that you're following so you don't miss a damn thing. But with all those beautiful notes out of the way, I'm really excited to jump into this third installment, right? And I mentioned this as soon as I hopped into the call today, so I figured should be right the way we start this episode. Me personally, of the two trilogies we have seen, this is the first time where I feel the third installment doesn't let us down. If anything, I feel like this one really has a debate for being one of the better movies in the series. So I'm really interested to hear how you guys feel about that first and foremost.
I wholeheartedly agree. This is a masterpiece in every sense of the word. And I think, in my opinion, wraps up the trilogy beautifully. And I think I would venture to argue, has the best ending of any trilogy, period. Just because of its execution, and I think also because of sort of the themes behind it, and I will be sure to touch on that.
Yeah. I would. This does what you would hope a trilogy does. Like, every film is supposed to get better, supposed to be better than the last one. And I feel like this one definitely is the best one of the trilogy. I think it was longer, and Matt, you watched the extended, right? So I am definitely interested in hearing what the differences were, because I couldn't do that. Not, as much as I wanted to for this one, I couldn't do it. But I think this is very well done for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the longest movie in the series, and that's before the extended version, right? So I agree. I feel like there's so many different loose ends wrapped up, right? A lot of questions we had, even in last week's episode, that got answered. So we might as well start there, right? That's where this movie starts. So it's fitting. We got a lot of questions answered about our guy, right? The devious, mischievous former Hobbit himself in well, I don't even know what to call him, right? I like calling him Smeagol before we got into this, but Gollum is appropriate. I don't know. I don't even know what to call him anymore. But we got to learn his backstory, right? Right off of the beginning of the film, and my favorite part about it is it really was a key into just how powerful the ring's grasp is, right? and obviously the context for that is he literally, I mean, they were hobbits back then, so he looked very normal, but he went out there with his cousin Deagle, right? Hilarious that Deagle Schmeagle, all kinds of familiar facial tones you make when you may say those words, but they found the after being pulled into the river by a strong fish, which honestly, this is one of the things in the film that bothered me, right? Because that
Yeah.
fish did not look that strong, bro. To be
Yeah.
pulling someone straight into the river like that,
Yeah.
did not look that powerful or imposing. You could have got a bigger fish. I mean, for all the visual stuff you guys did in this film, that was so kick ass. You could have got a better fish. But
Yeah.
he falls into the lake, and then while in there, he notices the ring, is able to retrieve it, and then a struggle ensues after they get out, where you see Smeagol go dark, right? You see him change, right, from um being just there out with his cousin on the water to having this really demented look on him, and eventually straight up kills his own cousin, right? Just to get the ring after he wasn't willing to let Smeagol see it in that moment. Um, I was just curious what you guys thought of that origin story, whether or not it was satisfactory, right? Um, and what do you think about sort of why Smeagol is just so unable to resist the ring compared to other people we see in the story?
Oh, that's a good question.
Um,
I'm sorry, Matt. Go ahead.
no, you're good. You're good.
Um, in terms of the origin story, because that was the thing that I really wanted to see after the second film. Um, I think we got enough. I think we got enough. We don't.
We
So
don't
we
need a
don't
whole
need a
movie.
Gollum film. Yeah. Even though some parts of it, I almost wouldn't mind seeing like maybe a short, but like an entire film is probably unnecessary. But I thought in terms of the story and showing at least the turning point for Smeagol, I think that was very well done. Um, what was your other question again?
How do you feel about his character's inability to sort of resist the ring compared to other
The
characters
ring.
we see throughout, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, I almost feel like so part of me is starting to wonder if the ring's power is a little stronger for hobbits than for regular sized man, because you saw the same with Bilbo, how strong it was for him. In fact, it was so strong he didn't age until he didn't have the ring with him. um and then Frodo lost his mind.
Yeah.
Like, the only one that didn't lose it was Sam, right? So I almost wonder if hobbits are like have a higher, I don't even know what the term would be, but higher exposure, I guess, for this ring to be something that's just um that grasp them a little more than a regular man. But I mean, you can still see like it definitely turned men into um like mindless puppets, but it just seemed like to be a little stronger for hobbits. And I don't know, maybe did you guys see that or no?
Uh,
I definitely think the Hobbit part of it is something that intrigues me, right? Because I feel like it's a mixed bag, right? Because I feel like Sam, obviously, we see the ways in which he isn't influenced to the same, I guess, effect. But I wonder if there is something there, like in Hobbit lore, that makes them more, I guess, like susceptible to that.
Yeah.
Matthew, what were you gonna say? Sorry about that.
I was gonna say, I honestly don't think so. And here's why. I think that really the only sample size we have is Frodo and Smeagol. So I think it's hard to like definitively say that if any or all hobbits are as likely or as least likely to be susceptible to the ring. But what I will say is that I think like narratively speaking, Smeagol being sort of drawn to the ring almost instantly is meant to be a parallel to Frodo. Because if you notice that Frodo goes on the opposite arc as Smeagol does, if you think about it. I think the relationship that Smeagol and his cousin originally had is not too dissimilar from the relationship between Sam and Frodo. And to see how, Smeagol, because he sort of has a fascination with the world around them, and then this ring is very much an example of that, right? The idea that it's going to immediately taken away from him, sort of obviously ends up being manipulated by the ring, and then he subsequently kills his own cousin. If you notice much later in the movie, and we'll get into that, Frodo was on the verge of essentially killing Sam for presumably trying to take his ring, about how those two are basically becoming at odds with one another. So I just think that that's mainly the core reason why. I just think that they really wanted to parallel Smeagol and Frodo's characters, of how, these two very innocent people, end up becoming the worst possible version of themselves. And the difference is one this ultimately decides to destroy the ring, while the other decides to um let it control themselves, so, and it does a very powerful thing.
So what about Bilbo then? Because Bilbo was losing it before he left the Shire, right? Like he was pretty much done. Like he was really losing his mind with that ring. And again, it just he didn't age. Like even in the first film, excuse me, Gandalf even said, "You don't look a day older than, I think it's something like you don't look a day older than the last time I saw you." And it had been a long time since they had seen each other. But it's like it almost seemed as if the ring preserved Bilbo's aging. Um, and then once the ring was gone, that's when he just aged like a grape. Um, what do you think about that though?
um it's interesting. I think, like, I'm trying to think, because I think that's definitely a fair interpretation. I just can't remember it. I just don't know if the ring has that ability. I was under the impression that you can still age as you normally do. The difference is your mind could be corrupted. So I don't know if there's a capacity for that. But I think at the same time, it's interesting because you obviously sort of see Bilbo distancing himself from people, and even him sort of getting the ring taken away from him for not even a minute. You know, look at him sort of lashing out at Gandalf. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's definitely interesting because I don't know. No, I think you're all right about that, because I'm assuming we both, all three of us, had the same ending. I mean, Bilbo is significantly older than what he was when we saw him, and that was only a 4-year difference. So I don't know. I just think, yeah. Um, I'm gonna be totally honest with you. I forgot your question, bro. You just want to say that again, because I kind of just, I was honestly rambling. I was
Let him
kind of,
cook. Let him
Yeah,
cook.
yeah.
I'm sorry, bro. What was your question again? I kind of just like was
Yeah.
rambling.
No, you're
My
good.
fault,
But
bro.
I was because I know you were saying that you didn't see the I guess the parallel between the ring's power and it being the hobbits being more susceptible to his power.
Gotcha,
Um,
gotcha, gotcha.
yeah. So I was wondering if you just think that like Bilbo's aging like milk just happened because of that, or it was just like it wasn't due to the ring.
I was like, yeah, I think probably due to the ring, but I also think that it probably affect every species the same. Um,
Okay.
and honestly, unless we, because I don't know if Rings of Power explores that, and I'm assuming the ring shows up there,
Yeah.
after its
Yeah.
creation. So maybe they give more of provide more of a canon to that. So, but at this moment, obviously, I think we're just led to assume that, at least to me, is that it sort of has that carryover effect to everyone. It just so happens that, few people we've seen have access to it are obviously the original king who kills Sauron, and obviously, you know, Smeagol, and then Bilbo, and then Frodo. So
Yeah. No, it'd be interesting. I will. I might actually check that show out now, just to see if that's a running theme through that. So
Yeah, for sure. See what there is to gain about that. I think, although I'm really jumping ahead in the movie here, I think this is an appropriate point to sort of have this discussion. So, uh right towards the end, right in the midst of the battle, we have excuse me, Frodo and Sam, after dealing with all their trials and tribulations, arrive to Mordor, right? And there's that confrontation scene where Gollum almost gets his way, right? Bites off Frodo's finger after Frodo sort of selfishly puts the ring on, and we get the feeling at that point that we're not really sure which way this is gonna go. Eventually, with Gollum falling to his death with the ring, and then of course Frodo barely hanging on by a thread and being saved by Sam. I'm just curious how you guys felt. Once again, we've had our issues with Frodo throughout the series. So how did you feel about this moment, right? And sort of the way it all played out.
Yeah. I mean, definitely satisfying. Uh, because seeing that little shit die was, you know, top notch. I think honestly, given the circumstances, it was a fitting end for such a deplorable character. Honestly, I mean, sort of see him, have this sort of split personality, and then to betray both Sam and Frodo. I think in some respects you feel sympathy for him. On the other hand, you just see someone who obviously cannot be trusted and obviously does not deserve any sort of attention or affection that Sam or Frodo would want to provide. Um, I think him sort of dying with the very ring in his hand, um, like I said, was rather fitting. He ended up getting what he wanted in the end, but it cost him his life. And I think that's sort of like the moral of the story here, right? It's sort of never don't indulge yourself too so much into something that you risk your own life in the process. And then obviously seeing Frodo have the temptation to sort of potentially dive back into the lava, and then Sam simply saying, "Just let it go, Mr. Frodo." You know, I think really put the rest of all the pain, all the suffering they went through on this journey. So I think very good
Bro,
storytelling.
Frodo is weak, bro. Like this only confirmed to me that Sam was the better of the two. And it irritates me that the story being told from that adventure is Frodo basically rescued the world. He saved the world from doom, and it wasn't him. He didn't save mankind. It was Sam. Sam is the hero behind the whole thing. He's the one that kept pushing Frodo and saved Frodo's life. When um he got caught up in the web, right? And stabbed and got paralyzed, and even when the orcs took him, Sam stayed by that dude's side when he had no reason to. No reason to. And I can't say Sam didn't feel the power of the ring, but he didn't fall for it. Right? I think he felt it, but I don't think he didn't fall for that power. And uh I don't know, I Frodo irritates me, man. I mean, the more that the story went, the further the story went, the more irritating I became by him. And it never changed throughout this whole series. It never changed. I really think that there's something about him that I think the parallel, Matt, that you were talking about between him and Smeagol makes a lot of sense. I didn't think about that, but they are very much alike. They are very much alike, and I think that I think Frodo would have turned into Smeagol. Like, had it not been for Sam, I think he would have turned into well, not Smeagol. He would turn into Gollum. I think that would have been his demise. Like the fact that he only lost a finger throughout this whole thing. I think that's significantly better than where he was about to go. So I think Sam deserves the credit for all of this.
About to go
Sam
6 feet
did-
under, you would.
Yeah. It'd be Ash.
And I really love how I turned into you during this movie. Like before, I was always the Frodo advocate, right? I'm like, no, this is just what happens, right? We get corrupted by the ring. What murder? And then before I knew it, then I'm like, yeah, this idiot. Like Sam is trying to tell him, like, yo, this man is trying to set us up. I saw it, right? Like I heard him. I know this is what he's trying to do, and still he's just blinded. I mean, in some ways, though, I do kind of agree with what Frodo said in that moment. Like, at that point, what are you gonna do? Turn back and have no idea where the
Right.
fuck you're going or what your plan is? So I do
Right.
understand that. When it all was said and done, I was honestly surprised that they even ended up in the right place at all. Like I kind of
Right.
felt like throughout all that they would never find their way to Mordor because of Smeagol just kind of dicking them around. So
Mhm.
I definitely felt that annoyance with Frodo. At the same time, I do kind of feel bad for him, right? Because I'm not sure that, and we don't get to see this. This is my main issue, right? With like especially protagonists, like when a lot of their motives are things that happen to them versus like things that they are affecting change with in the realm of the film. Like I feel like with him, we're just seeing all these things sort of being forced upon him, and now that different mindset is how he handles the world around him versus him making a choice and that changing who he is, right? So I definitely feel like he is a weaker character in that way, but I think also the dynamic between him and Sam is what makes him a good character in my opinion. Like the fact that
Mhm.
he although clearly very affected by the ring, is still someone that we feel with Sam, right, is worth saving, right? Because we know that it isn't his fault, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like that's the excuse that he's gotten, in my opinion, like throughout the film. Like, yeah, he's doing dumb things, but it's the ring's fault. And then even after the ring is disintegrated, we see how strong that bind is, right? So, I try to ease up a little on him, but I feel like the story would be so different if it was Sam. And if we lived in a world where maybe it was Sam and him being the same person he always has been ends up being corrupted by the ring too, I think that would have been fascinating, right? To see the difference. Um, but I think it's just a testament to the ring and the power versus just him being a terrible person who makes terrible decisions. Like I feel like a lot of that is just him being um sort of not having that post nut clarity, so to speak, right? Like just being so focused on what he needs to do that he just loses all other aspects of himself. So although we touched on a very big momentous moment of this film, we still got a lot to
Yeah.
cover. But I'm
Yeah.
just fascinated by this dynamic of the ring and this side story, right? It's almost like multiple different stories happening at the same time throughout this film. And in my
Mhm.
opinion, this was the most satisfying one for me. Like, although all the other stuff went on, all the wars we're about to get into, um,
Mhm.
I was really taken aback by how powerful the ring clearly is and what it'll do to people. Because that was the biggest sort of loose end tying that they did in this third installment, in my opinion.
Yeah. And before we move on from this dynamic of the film, the only reason why I'm saying that about Sam is because he took the ring off of Frodo before the orcs took him away, and he still had the wherewithal to give it back to Frodo when he saved Frodo from that tower. You know what I'm saying? Like he seemed to be the only one that was not affected by that ring, and that's why I think that he would have done a much better job than Frodo with carrying it to Mordor. I think he would have done a lot better with that.
It's a great shout. Yeah, I didn't even really put two and two together there.
I feel like that was such very short time frame though.
It was
Because
short,
remember,
but it
Frodo,
was long enough.
Hmm.
I don't know. I feel like, I mean, maybe this is more so like from a pacing perspective, but I was under the impression that Sam located Frodo rather quickly. And honestly, I don't recall the exact scene where he provided Frodo the ring, but it certainly wasn't when he was entrapped inside of the
No.
webs. Because if you recall, that was
So
already taken. He was taken off to the orcs with the ring in possession, and then Sam makes the remark of, "Oh," he's like, I forgot what he said specifically. He was like, "Oh, I should have, grabbed the ring. I wasn't thinking about it, or I should have, checked for a heartbeat." So I don't know.
yeah,
I can't get behind the whole Sam is a better candidate for the ring because you would have seen the exact same movie but with a different main character. I just don't think that there's
possible.
nothing from a character perspective that makes him an infinitely better candidate to be in possession of the ring. I think Frodo, given his friendship with Sam and how we're under the impression that they've been together for a long time, I think he would have shown the same deal of support and also make attempts to sort of um make any attempts to get Sam to sort of what's it called, to withdraw the ring at certain times so that he's given a mental break and that he doesn't become too corrupted by it. You know,
You gotta have
um,
friends like Frodo. You don't need enemies. That's all I gotta
yeah.
The shade,
say.
all the shade.
Yes, sir.
But hey, I think we got a lot more important stuff to get to here, but I don't want to let it go. I feel like this is my favorite aspect of the film, even though it's such a
Yeah.
minor thing, right? It really is, if you think about it, what the series is known for, right? So,
Yeah.
makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense that I'm willing to go down this rabbit hole. But before we move on, I wanted to touch on the scene with the spider. So, funny enough,
Yeah.
um, Sir Peter Jackson, I hate calling him Sir. I don't know why that's a thing, but it is a thing. He actually has arachnophobia and is like extremely afraid of spiders, and he designed the spider sort of based off of one of the ones that he's seen a lot growing up in his life and like his fear of spiders in general. So I was just curious what you guys thought of that moment, of course. Sam saving the day once again, even though he thought for some time there that Frodo was dead. uh just a crazy sequence, right? Shout out to the spider, because in some ways you could argue it did save Frodo in that moment in some ways, even though
Mhm.
we came away feeling like he just got in some big trouble.
I do have to speak on just the technical aspects for a moment. Now, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't play any music when as Frodo was getting chased, correct? Or did they play music for a bit and then the music died down as soon as he exited the cave? I know when he was
I think
outside of the
that's the
cave.
case.
I
Okay.
think yeah.
The latter half or the first?
The latter, yeah.
Latter. Okay. I think that was a brilliant choice because I think me and Derrick has touched on this. I think Chris, you better, and absolutely, I think we touched on this too. Is that oftentimes filmmakers try and manipulate your feelings with music rather than having you experience things organically. I think music should sort of be in a it's not even a word, like an accompaniment or to the company, sort of what you're portraying on screen. And there's a really great moment where Frodo, thinking he lost the spider, he has the camera like it's still, it pans left, it pans right, and then there's a quick reverse shot, and then he immediately gets stung. And I think the build of attention in that scene was extremely well done because it allowed us to not only have a sense of like dread of like, okay, seriously, did he actually succeed? Is the spider fully gone? And then even for a moment, as Frodo immediately falls to the ground paralyzed, we think of the very worst before Sam obviously intervenes. So I thought that was a really, really well done moment. I think is underrated. I think probably won't be as talked about much, but I just think for a filmmaking standpoint, it was extremely well done.
No, I agree with that. I think, excuse me, if I'm not mistaken, I think that part of the scene, I think, was quiet, and then once Frodo collapsed and the web started to be spun, that's when the music started up again. Um, I didn't even think about that honestly. That was a very tense portion of the film. Um, even though you knew the spider was there, but it was very tense to see what was going to end up happening. So no, I agree with that. That was a very well done.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too. I actually forgot that they showed like a overhead shot of like the spider crawling, and that's another thing too. At least it wasn't like a traditional jump scare. That's
It
why I
was,
really love
yeah,
that scene.
yeah, yeah. No, they did a phenomenal job with that scene.
For sure. For sure. I think a lot of this film was phenomenally done, including the next parts that we're about to get into. But um, quick before we get into the meat and potatoes of things, how did you feel about, I don't know exactly what to call it, but that orb, right, that was found, that was belonged to Sauron, that we saw Pip, right, I believe his name is, look into, right? And he actually almost kind of like the ring was like compelled to go out of his way to grab this, right, and really look into it. How did you feel about sort of what that foreshadowed and that moment in the film? Because to me, I kind of was, I wasn't really understanding why it was such a big deal, right? Until later on, a lot of these things get revealed. But how did you guys feel about that moment?
I was like, what an idiot! Why are you touching the orb? Yeah, I think honestly, the sort of hearing all these distorted voices and how Sauron, even though he's hundreds and hundreds of miles away, can sort of reach out to a person and find out their vulnerabilities, all their weaknesses and their histories and everything, and try and find a way for them to cave in and give them the answers that he's looking for. I think is a really cool thing. Um, I think like it, execution, like it's kind of stupid, you know, because it wasn't like Saren was like actively what's it called? It wasn't like the orb was like turned on, like
Mhm.
Pippin picked it up and then is the one who activated it, you know? So I kind of wish they just had a moment where like Pippin thought he was hearing voices, grew drawn to it, and then he sort of had to resist fighting Sauron before, Legolas and then Aragorn, intervened, as well as Gandalf, obviously, but
Yeah, I he's he's one of those characters that you like, but you don't love. Like he's because in my the way I'm thinking about it, he you could see that kind of tendency in him early on, and because of that, he'd have been. I would have at least said stay back, like mad early before all this stuff started. Because I mean, he drew in that whole Legion of Orcs. I think that was in the first film. Um, um, what else? I think wasn't he the one that was basically kind of like getting them? I'm sorry. I think he did something else with the trees, but it was like little things that he just did to kind of like irritate and throw people off throughout the journey, which wasn't toward the positive side of things. So I mean, I would have figured, hey, let's leave him back if that's the case, but um I think he was a good character. He's vulnerable too. Like I see a lot of similarities between him and Frodo. Like, you can see the redeeming qualities, but at the same time, there's an annoyance with them that you just can't shake. Um, and I think Frodo, I mean not Frodo, but Gandalf kept calling him what was the word? He kept calling him some name like idiot or something, fool. Then he kept calling him fool.
Full of a took.
Um, yeah, yeah. And it's like, if that's the case, you know, send him back. Just send him back to the Shire because he's not doing anything that's going to help you. But I don't know. I think he was a good character though. Toward the end, of course, especially with um, God, I forgot his name. Is it Bonamir, I believe?
That's it. That's his son, right? Dalamir or
The
something like that. I'm the
Balam,
worst.
yes, yeah. No, it's
His son
something.
was Boromir, right?
Some mirror, yeah.
Are you talking about the king of
Yes, the king of
I'm gonna
Gondor.
butcher the name of the freaking
Gondor.
Gondor.
what was the city that they were in?
Gondor.
They're in Gondor.
Wait, that's Gondor? I thought it was like
Mhm.
or something like that. Was it not that? Or
No,
am I
that's
tripping?
theologian. That's theologian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I know you
yeah,
said something like a or like something, but
There's
okay.
a lot of
All right.
fucked up names in this series.
Yeah.
All right, I don't blame you.
There
I
is.
don't blame you.
Yeah, but he even threw his life to the ruler of Gandor, to become his servant for no reason. You know what I'm saying? Like there was no reason for him to do that.
I guess
All
he
he had to do
felt
was
compelled because his son laid his life on the line to save him
Yeah.
specifically. Like that.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's the only
Yeah, that was
reason I would
established.
imagine. And his reaction, right? Like he already knew that his son
yeah.
was dead and was kind of like, "So what happened?" You know, like just kind
Yeah.
of like. So I
So
I
keep
think if there
quiet.
was any point for him to do it, that was the point. So I wasn't too mad about that.
That and
Yeah.
I don't know if they show the sneaks in the edition, but there is also a quick shot when Faramir confronts his father, um basically about them sort of withdrawing from like the destroyed city, like the very
Mhm.
city that like the ship people were trying to sail in. And he was
Mhm.
trying to like basically explain some situations. Oh, I did what I did in the best interest of my people. And then there's
Yeah.
a quick shot like Boromir in the background of like the king wanting to reach out to his son as well.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
literally the next scene after is when Pippin comes in, and I'm assuming sort of senses the hostility between both the characters, and like to Chris's point, felt compelled to offer his services because his own because obviously Boromir died in the heat of battle, and then obviously there's tremendous guilt over that whole situation,
Yeah.
so I think there's really just like a
Yeah.
build up of all these emotions and stuff. So I feel like it
Yeah.
was
No, no,
relatively in character.
yeah, it definitely was. I don't get the reason to speak when Gandalf told him to not speak. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
shut up. Like he didn't in that moment he didn't have to offer himself to
True.
him. You know what I'm saying? Like that's where I was kind of like just thrown off with it. But I mean, it was very much in line with him. He just
Yeah.
with his character, he just always inserted himself into things that he didn't need to insert himself into.
Fair enough.
So that yeah.
Yeah,
Trying to
I
write
see what you're
himself
saying.
into the story.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, I
like,
know,
dude,
I know, I
yeah,
know. But it's just like it just doesn't make sense. Like when you think about
yeah.
it, like Gandalf literally said, "You know what? Don't say anything.
And what did
You've
he do?
already done
And
enough. You've already done
you've
and
already
said
done
enough.
enough. Yeah,
Yeah,
just be
Literally.
quiet." And he
but
couldn't even do that.
what great scenes though, especially the ones between Faramir and Pippin. I'm assuming you guys had those scenes, right? The ones where Faramir and Pippin had a conversation in the hall before Faramir was sent by his father to reclaim that destroyed city.
I don't think so.
No, I don't recall what you're talking
Oh,
about.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was it was basically a great scene where like Pippin at the end of it says, like you have a different kind of strength. Your father just doesn't see it. It was really like the how
Mhm.
that's why Faramir is one of my favorite characters in the trilogy, because those added scenes give him so much character depth, and it's unfortunate they just cut it from the movie. I guess maybe
Yeah.
pacing wise it didn't work, and they really wanted to get to like to the meat of things.
Yeah.
But obviously it's this whole idea of being rejected by the very person you love, and things of that nature. Obviously all of the sort of verbal abuse he endured, and how he felt he has undying obligation, how he's really been in his brother's shadow for such a long time. And obviously to hear those words from Pippin before he goes and potentially sacrifices his life, obviously meant a great deal to him. In the end he survived, but he was
Yeah.
definitely this close to you know
I would
if you
say
get my drift.
one does not simply overcome the daddy issues alone. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'm sorry for doing a bunch of talking, but Chris, since I know Chris was like, man, shut up.
What we're
But
here for.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
if there's one thing I wanna ask you guys is because Chris, you asked about like the orb of it affecting Pippin. Did you guys see the scene with Aragorn touching the orb?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you watch that? Okay, good,
Mm-hmm.
good, good, good. It just reminded me of that. So I don't know if you guys
And I
want to
think
touch on
that's a
that now
perfect
or
segue. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
perfect segue to talk about Aragorn's character and obviously
Yeah.
his huge triumph in becoming the king, right? But
Yeah.
we got some ways to get there, right? There's some navigating to do. So my first question to you guys is, how do you guys feel about the elves, period? Like, but beyond just Aragorn, and then what do you think it means, right? Story significant wise, that an elf is the person who sort of completes this succession and ends up saving the world, so to speak.
Mm. I don't know. I mean, I can see their importance to the story, but at the same time, it like and it may be different for the extended versions. But I don't know that I really that like they were actually needed for a lot of the times that we saw them. It almost felt like they were filler at times, almost like I keep forgetting the name of that creature. Um, the guy that's riding the dragon that was flying the dragon all over the place.
Night King, right, or something like
The
that.
night, yeah, night something. Um, like he felt like filler too. You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of like how I felt with the elves. Like I could see the reason for them being there, but at the same time they didn't feel like I don't feel like we went deep into their whole arc as much
For
as we
sure.
could have gone. Which sucks because um, they're definitely important to the story, of course. And Legolas, right? Like they were all there and necessary. It's just that something about them just kind of felt unnecessary at times.
I'm glad you felt that way too, because that's kind of why I asked. I felt like there was such an emphasis on all these different characters. The only thing that really made sense to me was like the orcs being the foil to the elves, right? And
Mm-hmm.
them being elves at one point and all that good stuff. So I feel like that part of it was the only thread that I really noticed.
Yeah.
But as far as Aragorn's character, like just noble as fuck, right? Like just willing to do
Yeah.
whatever needs to be done for the cause. Um, I don't I don't know exactly how I do feel about him though, right? Because I feel like although he is this noble character for sure,
Mm.
and super selfless, right, and doing everything he has to do, it's not like he's doing this for his own gain. But I do feel like to a certain extent he is kind of one dimensional in that way. Do you guys agree?
Yes.
No, honestly, um, I don't think he is, and that's mainly because like Aragorn, like I also I don't know. I feel like he's rather complex in some ways. I think one, you, so this aspect I dislike, and that's his relationship with Arwen. So she appeared like sporadically in the second movie to set up what she was supposed to do in this movie, which was like going on the journey with all the elves and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not sense any chemistry between those characters, in my opinion. I'm not sure if you guys also feel
I
the
did.
same.
No, I
Um,
did.
yeah,
Second movie, they had some moments.
Second movie,
yeah.
yeah.
Because when it came to like the third movie, like I don't know if they had like a tremendous amount of chemistry together, and I just found it extremely weird that when you have a romance that critical to Aragorn's character, because this whole idea of, oh, they're destined to be together, and she appears probably, I mean, she appeared like three times in this, obviously, Return of the King. I was like, okay, like it is what it is. I'll accept it. But at its core, though, and what makes it compelling for Aragorn is that he sort of has like a definitive purpose in life, right? He sort of had to leave behind Arwen, in order to really go on his own journey of self-discovery, and I think at the time didn't feel like um, he felt he deserved Arwen, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us could feel like, maybe, like we deserve better, or we feel that the person we love deserves better. Those are kind of things I think all of us can relate to in some capacity,
Yeah.
maybe at one point or another. So that makes a lot of sense. And then when it comes to Aragorn, obviously being destined to be King of Gondor, what I appreciated was the fact of, like he didn't sort of need to have all these like I mean, he had plenty of obstacles along the way, I feel. I mean, him being in multiple near-death experiences, him being at the core of every major battle. Again, that selflessness really, like um being front and center in a lot of situations, sort of all the guilt and sort of all of sort of his emotions that he portrayed, knowing the fact that he will, many people will lose their lives. In the Helm's Deep battle, you obviously saw him reaching out to the boy soldier who was probably like 15 years old, about to go fight against all these orcs because they were just like all their men were literally depleted. And going into this movie as well, sort of seeing him sort of lead the charge and obviously come up with like having this sort of strategic advantage against Sauron to have him draw the entire armies over so that Frodo and Sam could sort of make their way um to um to the mountain undetected. I think there's plenty of moments for him to be this very like complex character in a lot of respects. I don't think he has like a lot of like outward development, so to speak. And I think maybe that could have been helpful, at least for definitely for you, Chris, and sort of like making you get behind them more. But I think, in my opinion, that sort of subtlety is what made him, a bit more interesting than sort of like traditional protagonist, if that makes sense.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think the general um I guess the general shifts in who our protagonist is, right, also affects that. Like I feel like a lot of the throughout the movies, you could argue there's multiple antagonists and protagonists that we're following, right, in their perspective journeys. So I definitely do agree with that. I just feel like it's kind of flat a little, at least for me. Like a lot of it just comes off of like, this is what I do because this is what I do, and then I respect it, right? To a certain extent. Someone's got to be that guy, right? But I feel like some not only just like struggling, I guess, with what you have to go through, but also like some contemplation about the reality of it. I don't know how, but that would have been interesting for me, to see that sort of ascension, right? Because not every day everyone gets the opportunity to be the king, right? So I thought a little bit more sort of seeing how it personally affected him, so to speak, would have been interesting for me at least. Sorry, I'm like watching people like crowd my car right now outside, but I'm kind
No,
of
you're
rude.
good.
But
Peter Jackson, and then he said, "Don't
yes,
talk shit about my character."
yeah, right. They're
This
about
your
to
this your car? This your car?
get him, get him. Nah, but as far
Yeah.
as
Protect your
this
precious.
final, yes, my precious. As far as this sort of final large hoorah, right? I think it's important to touch on this because this is one part of the story that I didn't like, and I don't and you guys might fully disagree with me. um but the underworld army, and Aragon's procurement of them, and them being the real swing factor in what determined this war.
Yeah.
Although I get it, right, the story element of it, I get it. It just felt so cheap to me as a storyteller. What did you guys feel about that?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I even like their execution of them too felt weird. It was like it almost it almost felt like Game of Thrones meets Pirates of the Caribbean in a certain aspect. It was just like it was like unnecessary. Like I again, I like you said, I get the progression of the story for them, but it was also kind of weird. Just I think I think why it felt weird is because while they were while Aragon and Legolas and help me with the dwarf's name. Um while they were down there trying to, get them to surrender and well, not surrender, but to help them win this war. Like they were able to walk through this ghost, but the king of the ghosts, I forget his name, but the king swung his sword and Aragon, stopped it. It was like, it was like he was actually battling with the human. I think that was weird to me because, well, again, this is a fictional story, so I'm not, it is what it is. But the fact that a ghost is carrying a sword that can actually do harm is weird. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
that was very interesting. I don't know. I'm assuming it's due to the sword that Aragon had, but at the same time, it's kind of it still feels weird to me. I don't know. I think that whole execution was just very interesting.
Well, were there any shots of like orcs being cut through?
Not that I saw.
No, but
Because
there
it
was
could be that
moments
they.
where.
Oh, sorry. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry, I was saying there was moments where you saw the effect of what they did to them, but it wasn't like you
Right.
saw them being cut open. But what were you gonna say?
No, I think that's probably like the point. Like honestly, I think it was more so like them literally dying. I think ironically dying from like from ghosts of all things, sort of like these entities that they literally cannot attack. Um, and I think honestly, I think executionally it worked really well. I think the ghost being able to like what's it called to connect their Aragorn sword, I think is a real testament to the fact that obviously this sword is like the what's it called, like the piece of the previous king, and it was very obviously foreshadowed in the very first movie, and I forgot to bring it up when we talked about it, because I was like, I'm 95% sure that's the same sword he's going to use in Return of the King, and I was like, well, it was pretty obvious the way they were setting it up.
Yep.
So I think it makes sense that obviously all of these men were, I think they were part of the original armies who faced off against Saren. I assume that's the case, and I could be wrong about that. So I think that's what makes it even more powerful, right? Is how like, oh, like you carry the a piece of our history, and I think sort of as Aaron, as Aragorn convinces them, hey, listen, like I may be destined to do this, but right now this is not about me. This is really about saving all of Middle Earth. And I ask you to take an oath, and to which they listen. They obviously greatly assist in the first major battle. I think it's also another thing about how Aragorn's, you know, a rather complex character, right? I think oftentimes you sort of take the high road and say, hey, look at me, like I'm the king, listen to me. No, he actually gives them a reason to follow him, right? And to convince them that, even though, you may have seemingly died for nothing, you can at the very least be at peace for something, you know. And I think sort of the way they were integrated into the final battle made a lot of sense, and then sort of closing off with that oath made a lot of sense to me, and I really liked it. It was different too, you know.
Yeah, no, it was.
It's a great shout there. I wanted to ask you guys as well about how you felt of the final, just the battle scene in general. Something that I wanted to mention that I thought was really cool. Um, but I mean, not sorry. Once you hear what it is, you can be like, "Fuck, Chris, that's cool." I just thought it was really interesting to read about it. So, after the collapse of that city, right, and the way it sort of fell, the tower and all that, the way it fell, sort of through the ground almost. Um, a main point in filming was obviously consider the time, right? They were trying to do whatever they could to make sure that the tower falling did not look or resemble 9/11 in any way, shape, or form, and that is why they chose to have it go sort of through the ground in that way. When I was watching it, I kind of felt like, man, this is a little weird, right? This isn't what you would what you would think of, right? When something like why is the foundation of the earth collapsing?
That makes a
But
lot of sense.
once I understood that, it really changed my perspective on that final scene.
No, that makes a ton of sense because I was wondering
Yeah,
the exact same thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I didn't
that
even
makes sense.
consider that. Yeah.
Yes, I'm
Yeah,
just
you think
curious
about the
too.
time when the movie came out too. It was
She only
like
two, yeah, only 2 years later,
2 years after.
and
Yeah,
if that too, because maybe they were filming a bit
they
after
were.
and take that into consideration. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's crazy to think about.
Yeah,
Yep. So as far as battle scenes go, personally, this is me. I'm not throwing shade, but I enjoyed the battle scenes in the second installment more than this one. Execution wise, but also just the way the gritty nature of it, right? Compared to this one, I feel like everything being so bright, like while it helped to understand obviously what was going on, I feel like for me it kind of took away a little bit of the sort of, I guess, dire circumstances, right? But
yeah,
I think I was really I was really satisfied with the way this entirely wrapped up, right? Because it did feel like we were always up against something that we never really truly understood what the strength was. Like although we knew that they were going to have these powerful forces, it always felt like right around the corner there was another reason why all this might be insurmountable. And another moment of exactly that was when the forces came in on those elephants. That was wild. That was a moment of the film where I was like, man, it might be curtains for our our good heroes here. Um, did you guys feel the same way when watching?
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna be honest though. Those that, and this is probably another. I'm not gonna get too heavy into it because, again, this was 2003, right? This movie came out. Um, I didn't like how Legolas went up that elephant. It just it looked weird, and even like a close up with him actually getting up there and uh I think fighting with a couple of the soldiers up there, it just felt weird to me. But again, that's 2023, 20 years ago. Jesus, looking at 2023, 2003 through 2023 lens. So I'm not gonna get harp on it too bad, but you could definitely tell. You could tell the amount of green screen that was there. That just felt it felt weird to me. Now I remember watching that scene for the first time. It felt amazing, seemed amazing, and I was excited about that. But at the same time, it was just it, looking at it now. It felt different. I didn't get that same excitement with that part.
I didn't really take too much issue with it. I felt like, with all the respect, if that bothered you more than the army of fake humans, I
Well,
feel
yeah,
for
no,
you. But something that I thought was
no,
really interesting though, and I think it was important for me to mention this because when I read
yeah,
this, I was kind of stunned by it. Um, a traditional film, right, usually has about 200 or so um, visually enhanced, right, with those added effects scenes or moments, right. This one had almost 1,500, right. So the majority of all of the film really had some sort of digital enhancement, so much so that they actually had to make a new server room where they were editing in
Jesus,
order to accommodate the rendering and all of that of
yeah,
all of those different effects.
yeah,
So I feel you. I think it did stand out as a moment like what's that mean? Are you sure about that? But at the
yeah,
same time, I thought it was particularly impactful, and I don't know how else they could have done something similar, right? To
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
bridge that gap. But I feel you on that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because think about it, like that's all you can do to bring those elephants down. They could have done that toward the beginning when those elephants were coming there, right?
Hmm.
You know what
Making it
I'm saying?
much
So it's kind
easier.
of
Yeah,
yeah,
made it a little
less
easier than it
loss.
had to be, kind of. Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
it was definitely a badass scene though. I think seeing Legolas sort of literally quick scope
yeah,
the elephant,
Intervention. Yeah.
and obviously bringing it to the
yeah,
ground was awesome. And even the way um what's her name? Oh my god.
Theology's
The
daughter.
Eowyn?
you
Eowyn
know what? Yeah,
or
yeah.
the one who fell in love with
There we go.
oh, I'm gonna forget her name today. Jesus,
With Aragon.
who fell in love with Aragorn,
Yeah,
that chick. I think
yeah.
I was gonna touch on this. Like, I was actually fine with her killing the ring wraith, like the main ring wraith.
Anyway, thank you. Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
because I think getting distracted. I forgot what he got distracted by. I think he was distracted by Meryn actually, because Meryn was brought into battle because sort of Meryn and Pippin went on their own own journeys there.
Yeah.
And then what I love, and this actually wasn't in your guys' cut, but there's a scene after where Eomer, Carl Urban, so their brother, I literally just found this out, honestly, but their brother and sister, and he basically like discovers her on the ground and lets out like this extremely loud cry. So I thought that was particularly effective. And he obviously saw all these bodies. I think he saw like a few horses on the ground, obviously bodies. So I do think that even though there are obviously a lot of fantastical elements involved, I do think that especially with this battle before obviously before like the main one at the end of the movie, I think there's enough greatness there to really convey like the brutalities of how they're fighting and everything like that. And if there's one thing I can say about the second and the last battle, this also wasn't in the regular cut for you guys, but Arrow, at least I'm assuming it wasn't, and if it was, I'm gonna feel like an idiot. But Aragorn, so basically, like Aragorn goes up to like the gates, and he requests to see basically the Lord of the Darklands or whatever. So he comes through, and he basically asks him about the fate of Frodo, things like that, and then like the night, basically like the Lord says, like the Orc Lord says, like, oh, they're dead, like you've lost all hope. And then before that scene starts, he literally whips out his sword and cuts his head off
Oh wow. Yeah,
in that
that
scene.
wasn't in ours.
That's crazy.
So the reason why that wasn't in the scene, according to Jackson, was I think he wanted to keep it, but he felt it was out of character for Aragorn. I think that it's not. It may feel out of character, but I also think it's an in character moment. And to explain what I mean, when at, thinking about everything Frodo and Sam have presumably gone through, to hear the words "your friends are dead" and the idea that all you've done has potentially been for nothing, it makes total sense that he would retaliate in that way. Um, and so yeah, he just outright just cuts his head straight off, and then runs back to the huddle, about to call their next play.
Hey, if I would have
So
saw that, I would have been Team Aragorn. God damn, I should have
yeah,
saw the
yeah,
extended edition.
that's another reason why like it's one of I love that. I was like, that's definitely like an in character thing to do. Like I said, like if someone says to you, your shit ain't mean nothing, and he says that your friends are dead, like I don't think anybody wouldn't react the way Aragorn did. And I was like, that was perfect. That was a really, really good moment. But I do understand why they cut it, because I think it's up for debate on whether or not, if it's the right thing, but I'm sorry, it was too badass, to not be included, you know.
No, thank you
Nah,
for
I
that.
wish I'd seen that.
Yeah, that helped a lot. That gave us a
Yeah.
lot of context, legit.
Yeah.
So I'm curious before we get into our star ratings, right? Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we didn't touch on, right? These movies are so vast, right? There's so much things that happen, and we're trying to get as much as we can of the main plot points.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you guys wanted to touch on?
Last thing, and this is a major one, like a major one. So Solomon, um,
Saruman.
or
Yes.
Saruman,
Yes.
yes. So obviously, he appears just briefly in the opening scene. Obviously, Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, and all of them sort of reunite after Isengard is destroyed. Um, so fun fact, he dies in the extended edition.
I saw that. Yeah, he falls off the tower, right?
Yeah, because basically
Yes.
he lays out this charge, and then I think Gandalf. So I remember that Legolas. You remember that guy who was manipulating the other king of Gondor? Not the king of Gondor, like the king in that one city,
Theoden.
the father Erwin. So he was there. Legolas like obviously shoots him. I think that was in your cut. I
Yes.
think it was was a Grimer or whatever getting shot.
Wait.
Grimer.
Like
I don't
Grimer,
remember.
the guy who was like in the king's ear whispering all the time. Before
Oh
he
yeah.
like went back to
Yeah.
normal. Yeah,
Oh,
so
now
he
I know what
died.
you're talking
So he died in that scene. And then I think his name was Grimer. I hope so. But so he died in the scene, and then Solomon like goes lay out this fireball attack. I think Gandalf deflects it or something, and then I forgot how he fell, but he basically fell off the tower and then literally landed on his wheel, and then his body went underwater. So he died. And the question I wanted to ask you guys is that's a pretty like significant difference. So I don't know if what they did in your cut made more sense, or if you prefer what they did in your cut. So I don't know what it is they did. Was he just like alive and then was like imprisoned, or like I'm just curious what they did, and if what they did was actually better than him dying, I guess.
Wait, so which? I'm sorry. What's the name of the character? I'm like looking
Saruman. So I don't know if you remember in the first trilogy, the first of the trilogy, the guy that fought Gandalf and sort of put him at the top of the tower. That's exactly how Saruman dies at the end. I don't think that was in our
Oh,
cut. I
I don't.
saw
That
that
wasn't
like a
in there.
clip of that. I saw a clip of that. So that's the only reason why I know that that happens. But yeah, that context really does help a lot because it gives
Yeah,
it gives a reference point, and then the fact that that didn't really
yeah,
happen at all in the regular version, to me, it kind of doesn't make sense. Like that's a huge part of
yeah,
the story, especially in part one, that just sort of gets swept under the rug. So great shout on that one, Matt.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, because I
that
just like I said,
definitely
I
makes
just
sense.
don't know like if if what they did in your cut
They
just
didn't
made
do
more
anything.
like made
No,
yeah,
yeah,
that's what I was gonna say. I didn't
they
know
didn't
if,
include
if
that.
it was
Yeah,
like if it was like fine with him staying alive or him die. Like I don't think it inherently matters, but I also think like it's a pretty huge difference.
exactly.
Because if you go to like talk to somebody about Lord of the Rings, like, yeah, it was crazy when Solomon died. Like what? Like
When?
what?
Yeah, yeah, literally.
And that's everything. And then I think the last um sort of difference, and this was actually back to Fellowship of the Ring, is that um again I talked about briefly about like the ending being beautiful, and honestly we can all ramble all on about that. It's in my opinion it's really well done, and I think wraps up nicely. But a fun fact is that in the extended edition, the first Hobbit of the main four, I think, you see is Sam. And in both editions, the last Hobbit you see is Sam. So it's just sort of a nice little, um, I'm not
Bookend.
sure,
Yeah,
like
a little bookend.
yeah, exactly.
I wanted to mention that too as sort of the point I wanted to touch on because I love that part at the end where we didn't get like the Sam montage, right, of like him achieving all his dreams, but we did get that moment of Frodo sort of handing over the book. And if I don't know if you guys caught this, but he writes in the book that Sam became the mayor of Hobbitstown. So we get sort of an idea
Oh
of
no.
the reward, right, of what he
Yeah.
went through and what he got from it in that moment. And I really love that because it really shows almost like a divergence in path between Frodo and Sam, where they both went through this journey in two different ways, right? But they also came out of it in two different ways too. Like I feel like Sam got his moment of glory, right, from that point forward, but Frodo felt almost ashamed, right, from what everything he had went through and what the choices he had made. So I thought that was a really cool book and to that storyline.
Yeah, and I think then him marrying Rosie, like considering like all he went through, just to see him actually be with the love of his life, you know? And even like when it comes to Meryn and Pippin, like obviously they went on this huge journey together. They obviously went back to Hobbleton, obviously to Hobbleton, and then obviously I think it was a 4-year time jump and everything. So it was nice to know that even though the journeys they went on was obviously full of challenges and they risked their lives, like the idea that they were at least able to live in prosperity with one another, really warmed my heart. And I think honestly, like Frodo leaving, you know, was really emotional. Because not only is he leaving, but like all of the main species are leaving. Like it's like the like Middle Earth is for man now. I think it's really just a reflection of the real world. How even though we're so diverse, like oftentimes, sort of like our main groups of people occupy different parts of the world. So I think that's sort of interesting to sort of see how like they're making like the Lord of the Rings lore and have all these different species sort of occupy their own lands. Until who knows, maybe one day they'll come back together to face off against another threat. Um,
Mhm.
and then I think I was going to mention one more thing, but I kind of forgot it's on my head. Oh yeah,
You're good.
and the last thing I wanted to say was another reason why I really love the ending is just the fact that like it's from Frodo's perspective, because Frodo's obviously been the main character of the journey, but as he says to Sam, it's never been about him. It's been about the people around him. And so could have been very easy for them to have the final shot be on Frodo, like closing the book. But the idea that, yeah, I know. But having it be on Sam, I think, makes the most sense, right? Because it's what Frodo would have wanted. This idea that Sam is going to continue on with it, with their story, with everyone's story, you know, and that it's going to be his job from here on out to, you know, um, start a family for himself, as he does in the ending too. So very touching, very touching.
Frodo's weak, bro. I have no respect for Frodo at all. I have no respect for him. It's like you do all of this and then you leave. Like you just run off. Frodo's weak, bro. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I love how you will take no other answer. Literally.
I'm sorry. He just is. He just is, man. That was after all he put Sam through on that whole journey, then he's the one that leaves. Like,
Had a family with Rosie though. Sam got what he wanted.
Yeah,
but
it's true.
it's just
He got to live a good
he
life.
got
Frodo
married.
didn't after that.
Yeah. But no, that's the part I can appreciate. But Frodo just I don't like Frodo, man. I don't like Frodo. I'm sorry.
I know for damn sure. And I just want to mention this. The one part that got me, where I'll be honest, I almost shed a tear, was when Aragorn, obviously after he sees Arn in the crowd, and obviously he's walking over to the main four, when he said, my friend, you don't bow for no one. That was a really, really amazing moment,
Yeah.
And then what's funny was, and obviously because Derrick has been very outspoken about Frodo, I couldn't help but think of when the camera was zooming in on Frodo. I could tell Derrick was ready to he was ready to throw hands. He was like, man, get the
man.
Because
he doesn't deserve that recognition.
Yeah.
He doesn't deserve to be bowed down to. He doesn't deserve to be praised. He doesn't deserve his name to be in lore. Like, he doesn't deserve all that. He helped, yes, he helped get that ring there, but he didn't do what he was supposed to do. At the end of the day, he didn't do it. It was his greed that took him over to the edge and almost killed him. And thankfully Gollum bit his finger off to where it was like he was able to separate from the ring. You see what I'm saying? Like,
you want to know what, Derrick? You want to know what you would have done? You would have panned in on Frodo and I think Sam was on his right. You would have done this.
Yeah. No,
zoom in. Yeah.
You know what I was thinking that entire scene? If I were Sam, I would have just pushed Frodo over.
Yeah, the zoom in
while he's wearing the ring. I would have pushed him over into the lake of fire and let that be that.
That's a good shout. I honestly thought that same thing.
You did
just
too,
get it
because
over
he
with.
was wilding. He was wilding.
He was. If it wasn't for Golem, in some ways, we might be fucked. Literally.
Gollum, honestly, Gollum is indirectly a hero too.
Indirectly, entirely.
Indirectly,
it is the most selfish hero ever. But yes,
he is very selfish. But indirectly, he saved Frodo from dying. Like,
so he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT.
Clearly, that's Derrick's favorite character. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
the precious.
He's the precious.
There's one note I want to mention too that I thought was honestly has nothing to do with the film really, but I thought was really profound for me at least. So I noticed this, and then I sort of wanted to get the context because I didn't really understand the lay of the land in 03, right? But at the end in the credits, obviously the Weinstein brothers were a part of this film and the development of it in Miramax. So in the credits, when their name appears, it actually, I don't know if you noticed this, is simultaneous on screen with a sketch of a man fighting two trolls, like as that was happening. And that was because Sir Peter Jackson had such a hard time dealing with them throughout production. There was actually multiple times where they threatened him to say, like, we could just give this to Quentin Tarantino and like X you out of this entirely, when he was trying to make casting decisions and he didn't really understand like why they were being so headstrong with him. But come to find out later on, obviously all these things came out and he was accused of sexual assault by so many different people. But a big part of those casting sort of changes that Sir Peter Jackson was trying to make that got shut down were people, women that were eventually a part of that lawsuit against Harvey Weinstein. So you could see there was actually workings of that storyline involved in this film. So that was a really profound moment for me, seeing that and being like, hey, that's a happy coincidence right there. But apparently there was much more depth to why. And then with the way everything plays out and our understanding of that now, such a crazy moment, right, of movie history and the way it was reflected in these different moments leading up, right, of actually the production. But then looking back now, it's kind of like, wow, like that's crazy that was in the midst of all this.
That's wild. That's
Yep.
wild.
Really
Jeez.
shows you, right,
Yeah.
the lengths and power that they had, right, to
Yeah.
affect change in these kind of ways, and really spoke to that. But on a much lighter notes, I'm happy, right? I'm happy that they got portrayed that way, because it's very
Yeah.
rightfully so. But now it's our favorite time, right? It's star ratings time, baby. It's time for us to give our final notes and of course our ratings. So I'm gonna throw to Matt on this one because I'm really interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I think I'll probably get a 2.5.
Yeah,
Um,
no big
I
deal.
think that
That's
it's
fair.
overrated in some respects. Um, I think that there are far
You're
too many.
trolling,
Are
right?
you
You're trolling.
serious?
No, I'm being serious.
Nah, he's trolling. He's trolling. He's trolling. He's trolling.
No, good.
I love that we had to ask, right? Because I
Yeah.
believe he got me there. He got me there.
No, I mean obviously a 5 out of 5. There's really nothing bad to be said about this movie. I loved every moment, and I think this is by far one of the best trilogies I've ever seen. And so I really appreciate you guys for really like obviously shout out to Derrick and obviously shout out to to Chris, like 'cause they were the ones who really came up with this whole ology idea, helping us come together all these different trilogies we can do. It's been really great so far to really like focus and sort of see, how characters can evolve over the course of three or potentially more movies, depending on whatever franchises we cover. And I think, these movies really excel at that. And especially this one. So Peter Jackson, you have my respect.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I love the film, man. This is my favorite of the trilogy for sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 5. I mean, I think that there's nothing bad you can say about it. There's nothing that um inherently that I would have changed outside of, you know, kicking Frodo over the ledge. But outside, I mean, the film was good, man. I even thought that there was a scene too with Gollum having that back and forth with Smeagol in this film too. I think there was when in the it was like a puddle or something like that, maybe a
Yep.
pond. And
While they were sleeping, right?
while they were sleeping, and it was phenomenal. I like again, I enjoy that dynamic where you're showing the two opposite sides. Excuse me, that's easily not probably is easily my favorite aspect of this trilogy is when uh Peter Jackson Peter Jackson has showcased that in the second and third films. So I think that's main reason why Gollum is my favorite character in the series is because he's so complex because
Yep.
you can cheer for him and hate him at the same time and it's very weird. It's very weird. So, nah, I can appreciate him. So, great character, great series. I've loved this trilogy. I think we might have to, at some point, have a discussion about our top 5 trilogies because this was easily one of them that I can see us all putting in our top 5. and it was really very well done. Very well
Awesome.
done.
Great
Godfather
shouts.
wishes it can be this good.
Yeah,
Oh
no, I was
boy.
about to get into that because I gotta
No,
ask you
no,
guys.
no, no.
So yeah, I'm gonna ask it, but I'll give my star rating first. I full disclosure agree with all of you guys. I'm going 5 stars as well. This was my favorite film of the entire series. Obviously, I was critical of the second one specifically, but um, I think this one really, obviously, the payoff that we deserved, right, for waiting this long, right, but also just the way everything came together. I really love this film. But with that being said, at this point, I think it's undoubtable that this was the best third installment, right, of the two trilogies we've watched. Um, but at the same time, I'm just curious, how did you guys feel as a trilogy this one matches up with The Godfather? Because me personally, I think the heights of 1 and 2 is higher than the heights of 3, in my opinion.
Mm.
But as far as like a solid 3 films, I kind of feel like you have to give it to Lord of the Rings over The Godfather. But even though I think Godfather 2 and 1 are better than any of these movies, I just think it suffers so much because of that third one. So I'm curious if you had to rank 1 and 2 as far as the trilogies we've watched so far, what would it be?
The order we did them in. Godfather first, then this one after. Because I think that the first one, the first Lord of the Rings, to me, felt it's an origin story, right? Like we're just getting started with it. Um, so it can't be so high impact and energy at the start. But I felt like Godfather was, even though that was an introduction as well. It didn't feel as flat as the Fellowship of the Ring did to me. Um, so I guess because of that, and I think that there were also other dynamics within Godfather that I think were just so consistent and perfect versus the Lord of the Rings. I felt like there was a lot of there was a lot of filler. I think for me, I'm not a fan of filler. So, um excuse me, I think that's where it's just like for me, I can see where it works. Um, it's like buying a crab cake, a frozen crab cake, right? Like it's cool. Like you get full from it. You can get full if you eat enough of it. But you want that real crab cake, that stuff you can only get on the on the coast, right? Like you can only get that from like the Baltimore area and stuff like that, like where it's like really gonna be phenomenal and no filler. It's all meat. Pause. But it's amazing. It's a great crab cake. That's how I felt about the Godfather trilogy. There wasn't filler. There wasn't
The
filler.
third movie was so much worse than any movie in this trilogy, though, that it
I can
changes my
agree.
perspective. But I feel you.
I can agree with you on that. I can agree with you. Well, no, I don't think that it was worse than the first Lord of the Rings.
Really,
I don't think it was the first. It was worse than that one.
I
Is
think that's a hot take, low key. But go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I just Lord of the Rings. Okay, so like, and maybe we'll get into it more when we talk about like trilogies and stuff. But like, as I was like, I'm going to be like upfront. I felt so bored watching The Godfather. Like outside of a few, like
Whoa,
I mean that's serious. Like
chill,
outside of like a few key scenes
chill.
I found compelling. Like I literally could not tell you scenes that I explicitly remember from The Godfather. And I don't
From the
know if
whole
that's just
trilogy
me
or
with
just the
poor
first one?
memory. I'm talking about like the whole trilogy. I
Whole
can
tr-
literally probably name
wow.
you 3 or 4 critical scenes. I literally don't like, and it's weird. It's really weird. But Lord of the
Wow.
Rings, like this whole trilogy, which I watched, like I watched every single movie back to back. I know I couldn't join you guys for the 1 and 3 episodes of Godfather, but like it just felt so monotonous to watch at times. And I think when I watched Godfather 2, like when I reviewed it, I think I gave it a 5. But like, because honestly, like I didn't want to face like the backlash from you two if I gave it anything less than like a 4.5 or something, or like even a 4. Because if I put a 3 on that shit, you guys would I would have been off the podcast. I would have been kicked off the podcast. But No,
I'm
it's
thinking
like
about kicking you out right now. I can't believe this.
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's just like yeah. I mean, it's not like a hot. I mean, maybe that is a hot take. It's just like
It is.
I
For
don't
sure.
know. I just
Yeah.
I felt way more compelled, and I had such a far more enjoyable time watching Lord of the Rings than I did Godfather. And when I got to the third one, like literally the only scene I remember is when Michael goes, they put like as soon as I walk out, they pull me back in. Really great scene, right? Showing how he sort of has this desire to not go back into the game, so to speak. Wants to be with his family. Obviously, ends up getting a freaking heart attack out of it, but then when he have all these scenes with like his daughter, and with respect, obviously I freaking love Francis's daughter as a director, phenomenal director. And actually I think she has a new movie coming out about Elvis's wife, so looking forward to that. Shout out. But when it comes to her acting, just like acting, they were I'm sorry, but they were dreadful to sit through, and I don't blame her. I just blame the fact, and I think I mentioned this, is that she unfortunately benefited from her father being the director of the trilogy, and I don't know if she went through a typical casting process or if she was just selected because of the name, And I don't like to make these kinds of accusations because I'm sure she had talent to give, but I think also Francis probably didn't give her the same kind of direction as any of the other actors. You know what I mean? Because that's his daughter at the end of the day. You don't want to disrespect her, and obviously you have more of an attachment to her than other people you have on the production crew. So I also think that's another reason why her performance in the third movie was just not good at all. I don't think she was devoid of talent. It's just when you're not given proper direction, in a script, even though it's not particularly great, like it's enough there on the page for you to make something out of nothing. I feel, because I understand what they were trying to do with the character, especially like the ending of the movie. To show that there's consequences to Michael having done what he did in the past, and ultimately catching up to him. Great ending. I would still argue, really great ending. Great acting by Al Pacino, but yeah, it's just like it was a trilogy, and I'm gonna sit by it. I'm probably not gonna be on the podcast next week, y'all. I'm on this huge rant. I love y'all so much. Yeah, this is the last time y'all gonna see me out here. Because I think after this record is over, I'm about to have to write my resignation. I think I'm being forced into retirement, like I'll be going to
No, I
into
love I
retirement
love
like
that you
Bruce
have
Arians
this
from
stance,
the
right?
Buccaneers.
I love that you have this stance because it's very clear, and I say this with no disrespect, right? If anything, we are very close in age, right? But I feel like you are entirely on the side of like this movie's fucking boring, like the TikTok generation of like this is fucking boring, which I can respect. Like ultimately, I think it's a respectable position. But at the same time, I don't mind. Obviously, this is your opinion fully. So yes, please do be honest, right? I would much rather you be honest. It's just so far from what is my truth, right? That I'm jarred. I'm shocked. I don't feel like I can't tell if this is a bit or not still, right? Even though you've reiterated that it's not. Um, Obviously, I'm going with the Godfather trilogy as far as which one I find better, but I really do think there's an argument for what is the better three movies, being the Lord of the Rings. Um, I wasn't anticipating enjoying it as much as I did, right? Like I'll be honest, as far as watching the films, for a long time I'm a nerdy guy. Like I want to establish that it's not like this is far from my norm, right? Like I'm a nerdy dude that plays RuneScape, right? Like you would think this would be in my alley, right? But for whatever reason I always was kind of like not fully interested in watching these films, and after watching them I definitely did enjoy them. But I still don't feel like I'm a part of the franchise, if that makes sense. Like I feel like a lot of people, like when I watched Game of Thrones for the first time, like I was a part of that. You know what I mean? Like I still feel like I'm not there with Lord of the Rings, but I definitely can
Yeah.
appreciate the movies for sure. So um now that we've let off a couple shots, I think all of our promo clips should be those rants, by the way, because it doesn't get better than that, brother. It does not. But thank you guys so much for going and completing this trilogy with us. Really excited to hear what you guys think as an audience and what you would want next. Right? Would love to hear suggestions on what potential trilogy you'd like to see us cover next. Had a ball doing this one like the last, so really looking forward to getting that all fleshed out. As far as my individual accolades, you can follow me on Instagram at Chris Negron _, as well as on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it at Negron MMA. I'm gonna make us. I've made the same handle for TikTok. Not active just yet, but I'm working on it. I swear, I'm trying to learn. My girlfriend, excuse me, whew, my girlfriend
Bless
keeps
you.
calling me an old man
Bless you.
because I'm having such a hard time figuring out how to use TikTok. So I will learn, I promise. And before you know it, you'll be able to find a lot more clips from the shows we do up on my TikTok. But until then, make sure you follow me on all those other platforms and you're following the brand, OTS Media Co., as well as OTS Media on YouTube. With that all being said, Derrick and Matt, tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can follow me at Derrick _OTS, DERICK, black way to spell it, baby.
You can find me over Instagram at _T29.
Yes, sir. Make sure you're following them so that you're staying in tune with all of our decisions moving forward. Really awesome episode, you guys. Had a blast doing it for real. Can't believe how quickly this time has passed. But thank you so much. Until next time, we'll catch you. Peace.